morning, everybody, and thank you so much for coming to this breakout session today. My name's Louise Gittins. I'm Vice Chair of Transport for the North, and my train was cancelled this morning from Liverpool. So who else had a cancelled train today? Okay. Who didn't come on public transport? Now, when I joined TFN in 2019, I made a vow that I would never drive to any of the meetings. So I've had lots of fun and games over the last 4 years, except during COVID when we did everything online. Really important session about decarbonisation, how we can get to net zero. The format of the session is I'm going to do a very brief introduction, then I'm going to introduce you to our esteemed guests. I've got some tricky questions to ask them. We'll have a bit of a panel discussion, and then it's over to you, and we'll aim to finish at 12:30 because that's lunchtime, which I'm sure you'll be all waiting to go to by then. So just in terms of Transport for the North and where we are, in 2021 we published our Decarbonisation Strategy, and this was a bit of a first really, because it was the first time a regional document of this type had been produced, and it brought together all the region's leaders to speak with one voice on the level of ambition needed to tackle climate change. And I think that's really a big thing about how we operate on TFN. We really do speak together with one voice across political divides, because we are also passionate about the North and improving connectivity. So the Decarbonisation Strategy provides a robust starting point from which TFN and our partners across the North can create the tools, capability and evidence that will help to shape our pathway to near zero emissions by 2045, which is actually quite a long way away. And if I was in control of everything, I'd want to do that much faster. But we are where we are, and that's our ambition. If you haven't read it, have a read of it. It needs to be read alongside some of our other strategies. For example, we just published one last year on freight and how we're going to get freight off the roads and onto railways, and a really interesting one about transport-related social exclusion that actually maps out our communities that are socially excluded for transport. In terms of what we believe, we think that an accelerated journey towards net zero transport network must be at the heart of public policy and investment decision making. And our ambition for the north of England is to travel faster and further than national policy. But I think we need to get the trains to run on time first before we do that. Anyhow, I've got some fantastic speakers here today who are going to have a few minutes just to tell you a little bit about themselves, why they're here and what their ambitions are. So we have Laura Pamma, who's the Programme Director for the Coalition for Decarbonisation of Transport at the Green Finance Institute. Professor Piers Forster is an atmospheric physicist who works at the University of Leeds and sits on the Committee on Climate Change, which is a really important committee. David Gill here is the Director of Stakeholder Relations for the Northern Gas Network. And finally, at the end, Councillor Steve Foulkes is the Labour Councillor for Cllr Council, but most importantly, he leads on Liverpool City region for transport. And congratulations, Steve, on that new role. So, without any further stuff from me, Lauren, if I can hand over to you, thank you.
Of course, thank you, Louise. Morning, everyone. I did drive. I'm sorry. I felt really guilty about it, and actually, I wish I could have used the 8 hours travelling to do some work rather than the 6 hours it's going to take me in the car there and back. But couldn't rely on the trains, and that felt justified this morning when it turned out the train I would have got had been cancelled. But anyway, so transport, as you all know, is the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions and responsible for more than 40,000 deaths per year in terms of air pollution. So we urgently need to tackle those emissions, and improve our air quality, whilst also improving connectivity transport across the north. It's absolutely mad that it's quicker to get here today from London than it is from Manchester, when it's really not that much further. So solving that decarbonisation of transport challenge across the north is going to require three things, I think. A clear, coordinated, cross-modal strategy, and obviously Transport for the North are doing some great work on that. Collaboration between local authorities, but also between other actors, and investment, and I guess that's where we come in. So, in fact, the last two are where we come in. So our mission is to mobilise capital across sectors of the economy that need to be decarbonised. So I lead our transport coalition. And we do that through assembling a cross-sectoral coalition of the willing. So that's experts from across industry, finance, academia, local and national government, and more, to try and identify what's the barriers stopping decarbonisation, and crucially, how can finance help to overcome those barriers? So is it new financial solutions that's needed and innovation in financial products? Is it data and getting data in the hands of the investors that need to understand the business models they're investing in? Or is it just knowledge building? And in fact, we find it's all three of those things. So our road transport coalition has been primarily focused on passenger transport to date, but we are going to be looking at freight later this year. And having put out a couple of reports over the last 2 years identifying the barriers, we also came up with a number of solutions. That includes things that we're now trying to develop into pilots and bring to market to scale investment into decarbonisation. So we are working on, as an example, something we're calling utilisation-linked loans. So that is all about trying to de-risk investment in EV charging infrastructure and trying to get it installed ahead of need. So linking the repayment profiles of the loan for a charging infrastructure to how it's used. The theory being, if you can install it in a rural area and you don't have to start repaying that loan until utilisation starts ramping up, which might be in 12, 24 months' time. Local climate bonds are something that I think we've been working with local authorities on, encouraging local authorities to issue a local climate bond where their local residents can invest from as little as £5 into a bond that repays over a number of years, and the proceeds of that bond are used for climate-related investments. So that's included Islington doing EV charging infrastructure. I know Warrington have issued one as well. And another one we're looking at is regional area tendering. One of the big things we hear from investors is that there's no shortage of capital. What they see is two issues: a sort of mismatch of the risk and reward, which is where we're looking at things like government guarantees and blended finance, and how can we use public capital more smartly, but also a lack of pipeline of projects. So investors actually say there aren't projects that are big enough for them to invest in. So what we're really keen to do is try and encourage more local authorities and areas to talk together and maybe aggregate some of that demand for projects and really build up the investment case. But that's just a flavour of some of the things we'll do, and hand over to someone else.
Thank you. That was very interesting, and I've put a note to myself there to get in touch with you after today. Piers, would you like to go next? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. It's excellent to be here, everyone. So today I'm representing the Government Climate Change Committee, and I think we've been very successful as a committee in trying to get the government to set very ambitious targets. So it has set strong targets for transportation decarbonisation, despite the law said it is currently the biggest emitting sector of the economy, but it had set good targets. And for example, the kind of 2030 kind of ban on sales of petrol and diesel cars and vans, but we as a committee are very concerned that the government isn't doing enough to deliver on those targets. So in our annual progress report to government last year, we gave 37 recommendations to different government departments, and we're about to report on what the government has done with their recommendations. And I do not want to forestall what we're going to be saying, but we're going to say that it really hasn't done any of those recommendations at all. And what we're really looking for in the recommendations is it doing far more on the delivery side of these things and the supply chain side. So as we all do know, it has to roll out the electric charging infrastructure, of course, and it has to really get more electric plans in circulation, and it has to really get people back on public transport with a good public transport infrastructure. And it could, to do these things, it could put in electric vehicle mandates to manufacturers. It could do things like set regulations for the efficiency of new cars. Cars are getting bigger and bigger and less efficient. It could set targets for that, and it could reform the planning disaster. I don't know how to, anyway, to try and make it much easier to install different types of charging networks, and to really get on with that. And as you were talking about, good ways of financing them as well. And it could also support the UK supply chain too, on good battery manufacturing and potentially hydrogen and other things to get going with that. But what I would say, because all I just said there, I've been very much preaching to the converted, and what I would like to say to our politicians and others is that we have to really sell the co-benefits behind this transformation much better than we're doing currently, for jobs, for the economy, and for air quality and things. And they can particularly support some of the kind of marginalized parts of our society, and I think we have to be very careful too when we try and be progressive, that we are beginning to see some significant kind of pushback, and the beginning to see a conspiracy type theory coming in for the 15-minute city idea, and ultra low emission zones, and for low traffic neighborhoods. So I think because we're all interested in the transformation here today, we have to be really brave as politicians to be able to push these things through in our communities, and to try and get this 50% of our urban journeys done by active travel by 2030. And there is evidence of good things coming out too. One thing we want as a committee is this strong net zero test from government, and the Welsh government here has been very progressive recently, where they said they're not going to do any more road building unless it's for safety. So prevented all new building. So there are things I think we can do as politicians and as really kind of passionate members of the decarbonisation community to try and really be progressive.
Thank you. That was really helpful, and I think how we communicate with our communities and getting that message over is really important. And I'm glad you raised 15-minute cities, because when you actually sit and talk to residents, what do they want? They want a shop around the corner, they want the GPs on the doorstep. So actually people want that, but as soon as you mention 15-minute cities, it becomes this socialist conspiracy where we're going to keep everyone in their own neighbourhood and they're going to have to pay, in our instance, to go to New Brighton or Delamere Forest, which is most odd, but there we go. So next, David, do you want to go next, please?
Thank you. Yeah, good morning, and thanks for the opportunity to share some views. Yeah, I'm David Gill from Northern Gas Networks, and we are one of the companies in the UK that distribute gas through the 330,000 kilometres of pipes that are in the ground in the UK. That's enough to go around the world 7 times, by the way, that we've already paid for and are going to last another 80 years. So that's what we do. Our area is the Humber to the Scottish borders, fish on one side and sheep on the other. And we look after 2.7 million customers. And up until about 5 years ago, that's what we did. We maintained, adapted and restored those gas pipes. And then there was a discussion by the then DEC that there will be no gas, it'll all be electrified, which is fine. But bearing in mind that out of the energy in the UK, 20% of that energy in the UK is electricity, 40% is heat, people's homes and heating industry, and the other 40% is transport, predominantly diesel. So it's a significant issue that we had. They called it the trilemma, if you remember. We no longer have a trilemma, but we have some real opportunities in the north to deal with this. I live just outside of York, and I came on the train this morning. I would have got the bus, but they only run 3 times a day. And it's like a fairground ride, I promise you, on this bus. So if you want me to get, and I'm not a transport guru, I'm an electrical engineer working for a gas company, so I like whole systems. But if you want me to get on a bus, please, and get in my car, I can turn the aircon on, I've got Bluetooth, I can listen to the radio, I've got connectivity, it's comfortable, it's warm, it's light. I don't want to be shaken to bits, and I don't want to have to get up at 7 o'clock to get an 11 o'clock train. Or indeed, I just don't understand why on a Saturday afternoon, the bus leaving York to where I live doesn't happen. It stops at 2 o'clock. I just think, what's going on? Anyway, so to me, if we want a modal shift to get people off the road and into other forms of transport, then it needs to meet the customers' expectations. And their expectations. And I like the point you made before, and you've just made there. We in Northern Gas Networks, I'm going to go off script a little bit. We have huge, as the Cadent and all the other gas networks, infrastructure projects that we put in. And we've learned, especially this last 6 years, when we're looking at testing the pipes for running hydrogen down the pipes, which is what we can do, is if we don't take that customer with us on that journey, then all we're going to do is bake in problems further on. You cannot impose on customers. It's got to be their choice. So we know there'd be no methane gas by 2035. It's not going to happen. So what options are there? And I look at it, and we look at it as what's hard to electrify? What is difficult to electrify? To take heat out of the homes for a second, freight. So we're looking at what can we do in the role of hydrogen for freight. We're blessed in the north. We've got 3 industrial clusters that are going to create hydrogen now. We've got a pipe which we can identify now. Our engineers are looking at this pipe that can run from the Teesside cluster on its own, and it's in the ground already. And we can do some jiggery-pokery with it all the way down to Humber, where we can use that, repurpose that pipe to connect those two industrial clusters together. So I'm talking about whole systems thinking, transport and industry. Now, I was talking to some industrialists up in Teesside when I was fortunate to have a round table with Ben Houchson some years ago. And our biggest gas user in Northern Gas Networks, I won't say who it was, but they said if it cost me $1 more to get a widget out of this factory, then and decarbonising, we aren't going to be here. So we've got to make sure that we take the whole systems approach, and transport and industry and decarbonisation, I believe, are linked. So there's the whole system aspect of that. We're looking at, and the other thing I think as well is that because we've got so many advantages in the north, the energy system is going to be regional. We've got to think about it regionally, locally even. And we're looking in places like Doncaster and Bradford now, where we're working with the mayors to look at some decarbonised modal transport. So it's not one or the other. It's not hydrogen. It's not electric, but it's what fits the customer and take the customer on that journey.
Thank you. That's really interesting, and that type approach, I think, is really important, because the way we've been living our lives now is going to look very different in 10, 20 years' time, and I'm starting to wake up to that fact. But I think we've got an awfully long way to go before we're even at the start of the journey, to be honest. Steve, thank you.
Great to be here, everybody, and I'm Councillor Steve Foulkes, by the way. I chair the Liverpool City Region Transport Committee, and I work very closely with our Metro Mayor, Steve Rotheram, who you may know, and all the other leaders around the city region. I'm also a long-suffering Evertonian, so that's why the glum expression is on the face. My train was okay, thus I got the 6:25 Transpennine from Lime Street. The only problem was it was 15 minutes getting in late, which is pretty good for them. And I also, my charger didn't work. The plug I tried to charge my computer on wasn't working. So that's my journey experience. So we declared our climate emergency in 2019, and we're committed to net zero by 2040, which is 10 years ahead, I believe, of the national target. And it's real to us. We're a coastal city region. I live on a peninsula, the Whittle Peninsula, surrounded by water. And the fact is, the arguments have been won that if we do not tackle climate change and climate emergency, big parts of my place where I love and I live will be underwater. We've won that sort of argument in people's minds, but how do we get them to do something really seriously about it is probably what we're going to discuss later on. So we've got to focus on equality, fairness, and it's a fact, as a Labour politician, it saddens me, but the poorest people in our society are those who are going to be worst affected by climate change. People with current health issues, whether it gets hot or cold, they will be the ones that suffer. And that's something, again, that we need to think about when we're talking about, because climate change isn't about fancy gadgets and transport. It's about people and about people's behaviour. And that's where I come from as a people person. So, transport is one of our biggest emitters, and obviously we're here to talk about transport, and we've got a plan to try and tackle that. And we've got some really good stuff. As I say, technology cannot fix the problem. Whether every car becomes electric, we will still have the same number of cars on the road. We will still have the experiences the politicians were telling us about this morning, sitting in traffic jams. It's just a phrase. The phrase changes from, I think the phrase we're using now is clean congestion, is a phrase that's being used, that we still have the number of cars. So whether, people try and fob you off and say, well, it'll all go away because it'll all be electric vehicles. No, you still have those issues, and we still need to get people on public transport as a challenge in its own right. So we have been using technology. We're very proud on Liverpool City Region. We've just bought £500 million worth of trains. It's like a boyhood dream, innit, buying your own train set. But but they are fantastic, and maybe we want to explore those who are entering into big projects of how we include people. So I'll maybe talk later about inclusivity, how we involve actual people in the design of the trains and the service before we went to tender. And likewise, we're just about to purchase 20 hydrogen buses. I'm very proud they'll be on the network soon. So we will own publicly owned trains, publicly owned buses that we will lease out to our franchise. Well, we're going for franchise on the bus reform. We made just before I came here on Friday, we actually are now moving to the formal consultation phase on Merseyside and the city region. And it's between, obviously, you have to go for franchise or enhanced partnership. But our favourite option is the franchise, which is as near to regulation as we can get under the legislation. So we need to have a big shift to walking, cycling, bus and rail. We've got to really learn, and I'm here to learn as well, how we make those big changes, because what we're offering people is a bit of a dud deal at the moment, isn't it? It's get out your cars and put you onto something that is not as high quality. So quality is certainly going to be an issue for us. As I say, I'm very proud of our system on Merseyside. We run a Merseyrail franchise. It is the most efficient public transport network on rail. It's 98% on time. You know, they're the sort of figures we should be offering to customers. The new trains will attract more people on, we hope. But we're still, I don't know about in your region, but we're still not back to the pre-COVID levels of transport use. I don't know, everyone else is in that similar situation. And we also have very, very generous concessionary fares travel. So we offer, at the age of 60, for every one of our citizens, free travel on trains and buses within the city region, and I think that is inclusive. We have a little joke because the concessionary pass doesn't start till 9:30. So when you get on the bus driver says too early. So everyone who's got a pass now calls himself a twirly. So I'm a twirly. I've got me card, and everyone's bought into that. We're the twirlies because we always get shouted at for getting on the bus too early. So honestly, that's a bit of a snapshot of what we're doing and where we're from. We've got a stand downstairs. We want more detail about the hydrogen buses and some of the things we've got on offer. I'm here to learn myself, to be honest, because I think this agenda, you never stop learning. You never stop picking up ideas and meeting experts in the field. So that's what we're here for today, is to enhance our knowledge, to go out there and get people out of the cars into public transport, to walking and cycling. Throw everything into the hat, the e-scooters, you name it. Anything that gets people out of the cars is going to be good for you and our generations to come. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. That was very, very passionate. And actually, what Steve did there was highlight inequality between the regions in the north. So me in little old Cheshire West, which is part of a sub-region of Cheshire Warrington, we haven't got any devolution whatsoever. So we're sort of nestled between Liverpool City region and Wales. So we work very closely with both areas to see how perhaps some of our residents can benefit. But actually, Wales are doing some really interesting stuff around multimodal travel. So getting people from as soon as they come out of their door, getting around the region. And I think it's that sort of approach that we need to look at. But that inequality of some areas being able to franchise their buses and some areas not needs, I think, addressing, which actually, so I'm going to ask you a question. So when it does come to transport decarbonisation, what sort of actions might best be tackled at a regional level rather than a national level? And I don't know who wants to go first. Piers?
Well, perhaps I can just kind of repeat what we said from the Committee on Climate Change perspective, and I should also really give an acknowledgement to the TFN's decarbonisation kind of plan as well, that was developed by Peter Cole and colleagues that did an excellent job of laying out what has to occur, and it's very much time with our committee view that a lot of the actions do have to occur within communities, but it has to be properly joined up and supported by central government, and that isn't what we're seeing occurring. Central government has to be able to give communities the power to make big financial investments and give them the long-term sustainability so community can make these big decisions and own them. And what's happening currently is that different communities, like your community, probably are fighting for applications to try and get some funding from government to do a particular decarbonisation scheme, and you are competing with each other, which is ridiculous, and you ought to be all getting on with it and working together. And that is where we think these net zero forums that combine with the levelling up agenda, where that can all fit together to get that empowerment. But His Majesty's Treasury is really not giving up the strings currently, and we have to get them to give up those purses.
Thank you, that's very helpful. David, did you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll just pick
Steve,
up on.
then Lauren.
Is that okay? Yeah. Thank you. I agree with everything you said there. For me, I think the schemes, projects must be regional, even local, to start now, and absolutely getting the funding from central government. I will talk about the energy system. It's going to become more fragmented as we go, more than we've ever seen before, and it's not just going to be electric. It's not just going to be hydrogen. And I'll just go back 6 years. But I worked for Northern Power Grid 11 years ago for a number of years. And when I worked for Northern Power Grid, we never spoke to Northern Gas Networks. Same footprint area. They were just the people that caused problems for our electricity system. They just dig up the cables. Now I work for Northern Gas Networks. They don't talk to the power company. They're the people that damage our gas pipes. They're both energy vectors. We need to work together. One of the issues we've got is we're both regulated businesses. The regulations 2 years apart. So they're already now working out what our investment's going to be for our networks for 2028, for the next price review. We need to have some form of working together, and it's easy to say it. You know, there's an advert on TV years ago, I think it was Carlsberg advert. But, I mean, I'd even talk about the gas networks, the 6 of them, 5 of them. Sorry, you should know that. We're working together now, and that's only the last 4 years. Because what the government have done is they've introduced things called competitions. So the industrial clusters, when they first started out, was a competition. So who's going to invest like £2 million to put it for a competition? It's just bonkers. Anyway, that's my personal opinion, not necessarily of NGNs on that side. So I do think that it's going to be more fragmented. I think the decisions on transport will be linked to the decisions on low carbon industry power as well. So we need to understand what's happening in the industrial sector. And it was a few years ago when I was across in Manchester, and I'm sure it wasn't one of these events, but it was about transport. And there was a guy from Drax speaking, and they import pellets for their furnace. And he was saying it takes, I think he said 11 hours for the train leaving the docks on the west to get to Drax. Now, you know, you've got to, if you're going to take that situation, I mean, obviously freight, I'm not a rail expert at all, but we've got to make sure that what we're doing, if you're taking things off the road onto railways, that it becomes something commensurate that the actual industrialists need. And I don't think it can be done nationally. I think it should be levelly and regionally, and we're in the north in a unique position to do that.
Thank you. And the point about freight's really interesting. I know we've had a local issue, part of the work we're doing with Wales. We put in a levelling up fund bid for the Wrexham to Bisden to Liverpool line for improvements, new station, and to increase frequency. Transport for Wales already wanted to increase frequency. So while we didn't get our levelling up bid after 2 attempts, we still haven't got it. But what Transport for Wales did was put in for a half-hourly service, and Hanson Cement objected to it, even though they'd signed our levelling up bid, because the increase in the passenger trains, which was important to get people to jobs and various other things, would have interfered with their freight lines. So that actually created a system where passengers and freight were competing against each other. So talking to sort of service users, we compromised and said, right, okay, well, until we get the money to improve, all they need actually is some signal changes and some standing at the side so that they can wait there and then go to the cement factory. So we've compromised and said, okay, well, when your train wants to come through with the freight to Hanson, we're going to reduce the passenger. So we've got a half-hour service coming at some stage, but during the day there'll be a time where they're not as frequent. And it's that sort of joined up thinking. We've managed to do it at a local level, but wouldn't it be great if we could do that on a national level? Anyhow, so Lauren. And then Steve.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think so it feels like policy should be set at a national level in terms of, dates for decarbonisation and targets, but then actually delivery really fundamentally is a local challenge. You know your local area, so you've got a cement factory and you've got residents who need to get around. So for me, it's what needs to be done regionally is actually the implementation and delivery of national strategies. And I do also think that also involves local areas talking together, though, and actually trying to work more collectively together to get funding bids from government together. So I've been involved in the Levi Fund design, which is the local EV infrastructure fund, and trying to convince government to maybe give that money out to the subnational transport body level, or, to at least say, well, why don't you have some standardisation across regions rather than within a local authority area? But that was met with a lot of resistance from local authorities who each wanted to do their own thing and they wanted to access the money and be that sort of winning bid. So I think there is a real mix of what needs to be regional versus very local and sort of, national.
Thank you, Steve.
I think first thing to recognise, of all the services politicians are involved in, the one that doesn't respect boundaries or borders is transport. Simple as, doesn't it? People go to university in one region, or they'll study, or they'll work elsewhere. So once we get our heads around that we're all joined together. We're halfway there. I was going to touch on freight. There's some strange relationships within the northeast, and all of the household waste from Merseyside actually comes right across the country and comes to an energy burns for energy plants in the northeast. So boundaries aren't really there. They're not really to be respected. I just think there are things we can do regionally on a local level. I had a really interesting conversation with these guys. These are the young people that are joined together as they call themselves the Young Combined Authorities, and these are young people from the combined authorities across all the country. There's people from Birmingham and so on. And they basically said things we can do for them is we all have different offers for young people on our buses or trains maybe, but they can't transfer. So if I want to go to Manchester as a young person, I get confused because their system's slightly different. So if we're all talking together, these are things that we can do. We can actually have a young person's, they were talking about, can we have a young person's national travel pass similar to, we talked about the old age pension as one. So, these are things we can do. We can make life easier for the customers, and we look at the whole range of customers across the board, and young people are the future. We can get them involved in public transport. They may never buy a car. So.
Thank you, and that's a really good point actually. I don't have any twirlies in Cheshire West, and where I live, we're right on the border, and residents say to me, why can't I have a bus pass when I'm 60 like they do in Heswell? And it's like, oh, I'm trying to, so that there is a confusion, and people don't see that, but a really good point. So what I thought I'd do now is open it up to questions from the floor. Apparently this is the roving mic, so I'm going to have this removed from me. So, is that okay? Yeah. So who'd like to? Oh gosh. So I'm going to start right at the back over there. I know. Well, this is great. I love seeing lots of questions.
Hi, thank you very much. Is one of the biggest barriers to actually creating a properly integrated transport system the way that funding is all about competitions rather than allowing us to actually plan a system? As a consultant based in the Liverpool City region, I'd love to be spending my time working on delivering schemes as opposed to writing bids for a lottery, in effect. Interested in the panel's view.
So I don't know who wants to go first, but certainly our ambitions for Transport for the North is that we have devolved power and funding to just crack on and deliver the schemes rather than all the fannying ground. Apologies. Right, who'd like to answer that first? Steve?
It's a very valid point. We bid for they all always have long titles, don't they? But the CRSTS fund, which we bid for, we were one of the winners. We got 710 million. But then we found out it wasn't inflation proofed. So with inflation at 10%, it goes down by 10% every year. So your spending power is going. But on the other hand, we put in for 80 million on the BSIP, Bus Services Improvement Plan bid. Again, competition. And we only got 12 million. So, you can't really run a borderless organisation where you are compete with each other. So you're quite right. And the speakers this morning said some sort of national cohesion is definitely necessary to make sure we're all doing the best for our customers. Yeah.
I think definitely, yes, that is a problem. And actually, it's not just the time that's taken to then compete for that funding. It's also actually a sort of capacity issue within local authorities and the resource and the time it takes for you each to fill out exactly the same form. And I've reviewed some of those. I've reviewed the Zebra funding ones for DFT, and they are really long. And you just think the amount of effort that people have put into that, and the amount of effort that has to go into reviewing it, there must be a better way. And I think with the Levi Fund, actually, that's what they are looking at doing. They are devolving that out with a pre-agreed pattern rather than it being quite so competitive, because we did make that point that, it's just the resource it takes to bid for that funding is crazy. And they also don't take into account, or trying to get them to take into account, more sort of innovative uses of that funding. So can they use it in a way which isn't just grant funding, but actually maybe use it to guarantee some private sector investment, where private sector are happy to invest in some of these local projects. So we'll see.
Yeah, I would agree. For somebody who actually fills these forms in as well, for some of these funding, I was on a call probably about a month ago, where there was a little bit of money up for grabs, 4 million-ish, and the government host said we're expecting about 6 to 9 bids, successful bids, and there were over 500 people on the call, 500 organisations. So I came off that call thinking, what chances has anybody got of getting this competition? So I to me, devolve that capital, give it to TFN, set the policy, granted, do that by then, give it to TFN, let the clever guys and girls in TFN do their job by saying, and we're doing one now, right? I go off piece a little bit, where we, as Northern Gas, across the north, you've got a model which kind of identifies the EV charging, what you need for EV charging. We've got nothing for freight, so we're it's little. So we're working with TFN, which is the first time ever that we've done this, which is fantastic, on what that model, we're about to pull levers. It's taken us longer to work out the contracts for who's got the IP on this blooming model. We don't want it, but it's certainly going to be helpful and useful when we put it together. So I'm in agreement. Competitions. Let's do something that's zero risk. And the last little bit is one of our sister companies called Everschultz, a rail, and they've worked with Alstom, I think, and have got a hydrogen train ready to run. The complexities of trying to get that working is just, and who owns the franchise and the 40-year lease and the 15-year cut-off is just bonkers. So let's try something. Let's just do something which is zero risk, which gets hydrogen out there and I go back about customers, 'cause I'm with you 100% on it's about customer centric. But if customers can see something and touch something and be on something like a hydrogen bus or an electric bus, if they can see that, then happy days. How many hydrogen fueling stations do you think are in the north of England? One. We have 2 hydrogen cars, and I can get my hydrogen car from Leeds to Hull. I can get on the ferry and I can go all the way to Italy and back again, but I can't get it to Birmingham. So we've got to break that chicken and egg situation. I'll stop there.
That's very interesting. Piers, do you want to come in?
Perhaps I just try and be more optimistic. I think there is opportunity. I think with organisation like Transport for the North and with more emphasis on devolution and levelling up, there are opportunities to put really big, ambitious requests to government together. But this does again come to the local authorities to be consistent and coherent in what they're asking for. And we have been kind of deterring them, and they aren't as cooperative as they should be. So there's an opportunity there, I think. If we can speak with one voice in one way, we can get that devolution and that money from kind of levelling up. So there's opportunity for Transport for the North and others to really make one big request. And what we have to join up is that with the cash for delivery does come the kind of responsibility for delivering it. So if you want to have the kind of finances, then it's up to you to do the delivery. So that isn't what is connected currently.
Thank you. That was really helpful. So this chap here, and then I'll take a couple from that side. It was this guy here on the front row. You smiled nicely during that thing.
Thank you. Quentin MacDonald. I'm a professional electrical engineer, but a railwayman. However, this is an interesting question. 2 points. One, the fare structure system is a total nonsense. Doesn't matter whether it's buses, trains, push bikes, whatever. You should just be able to use it. I'm very encouraged by the gentleman there. I see it as central government's role to take out of the present arrangements the rubbish that you cannot walk up to a station and buy the cheapest ticket for the train. I've just helped somebody with a problem in that direction. However, that's central government to provide the tools and then local authorities to crack on and use them. But I've heard a lot about hydrogen. I can't see there's a lot of options but to shove hydrogen down the pipes, because we're not going to go on burning methane at home. That's clear. But there is another whole school of thought that says that actually we haven't got green hydrogen at the moment, as I'm sure you know. And what we really should be heading for is the ammonia economy. And I'd like to hear the panel's views on that, because that's really interesting. And we make 100 million tonnes of ammonia per year, not for transport, but for other purposes, using the Haber-Bosch process, which is wildly inefficient, chucking carbon dioxide in the air. There have to be other approaches, and I think they're probably on the horizon.
Thank you. That was, so are we going to see ammonia trains? Piers, you're probably the best place for this. Thank you.
Okay, well, I can just speak to that point. Well, we think it is a good solution for shipping, but we do not think it is a good solution for kind of surface transport because of things like the air pollution. side, and there are also issues with efficiency. It's incredibly inefficient thing. So that's why we, as a committee, think we have to go really full electrification. There is a question mark over HEVs and buses, if that will fully work, but we have more electric buses and more electric HEVs coming on. So we really think, because as you said, we don't produce much green hydrogen, we have to use that green hydrogen for heavy industry in particular, where there are no other solution. And the other thing, we are about to release a report in 4 days' time as the committee, and this is about decarbonising our electricity supply, and we think we're going to use all that green hydrogen up as a energy storage vector for when the wind and the solar isn't going to working. So rather than have a huge kind of base load generation capacity, we're going to be using wind and solar with kind of hydrogen, and there isn't going to be much there for other things.
Thank you. So this guy here, halfway down on the right.
Thanks, cheers. I'm Stu, I'm from the Liverpool City region, and I'm also from Wales originally, so I've been watching the Welsh Roads Review with interest. And do you think the answer to decarbonising the north is on that pull-up behind you and following their lead and cancelling all major road projects on the grounds that it's totally incompatible with what we need to do for the climate emergency?
Yeah, so I mean, it goes back to taking our communities with us, and I know there was quite a lot of outrage when Welsh Government, when I say quite a lot, it was the groups who don't like 15-minute cities, don't like 20-mile-an-hour zones, because obviously it's the end of the world if you have to drive your car slower. But I do respect, they are worried. Some people are genuinely worried about it, and yeah, I would do that. But you know, full council, the hot topic is always potholes. So you know, never mind the crisis in adult social care. It's about potholes. It feels a bit of a Liverpool-y thing today, doesn't it? Yeah, Steve.
I think you're right, and I think a lot of the road plans that are in were written when we had a different mindset. So I think there definitely needs to be a review and a shakedown. You'll know the local one for us, the Rimrose Valley road. No bugger wants it, be frankly honest, but it's still sitting there as part of a long-term strategy. So I think before we cancel anything, let's have a debunk of it first, and then maybe get to the point where we do say we don't need any new roads. And if we, as I understand it, a point I learned the other day from a few meetings with the TFN, for the first time, the rail strategy and the road strategy are going to be co-written, or they're going to be talking to each other as they're being written. Maybe you want to elaborate on that, because that seems common sense, doesn't it? Don't have a rail plan alongside a separate road plan. Work them together.
Absolutely. And Transport for the North primarily used to be about trains. It's the same as Growth Track 360 that I chair. But now we're moving towards that multimodal approach where you can't just look at things in silo, and it all needs to be linked up. And I think once we start doing that and having that conversation with our communities, that's when we can look at it. But I agree with that, Steve. Lauren?
Yeah, I mean, I work in finance, not politics. If I did work in politics, I would cancel road building. I think you do need to, there is going to come a point where you've just got to make it more difficult for people to travel by road than by public transport, in the absence of public transport getting easier than travelling by road. I mean, I knew today that it was going to take me 3 hours to drive here. And worst case, if I got stuck in a traffic jam, it would probably be 4, and I could find some way around. But that was still quicker than getting the train. Had it been the other way around, I would have got the train, no debate. But I do think you're right, it's a whole systems approach, and we do need that that whole strategy, because you can't just immediately cancel roads if you're not also investing in the public transport, if you're not trying to encourage people to shift to active travel, and if you're not encouraging that multimodal shift. So I wish it was that simple, but it probably isn't.
Yes, so yeah, we as a committee think that should be a net zero test of some kind for every single kind of project that comes on. But the other thing with the road, the other thing we want as a committee is that the Treasury and DFT do really have to explain what's going to happen with current fuel taxes and what's going to happen with vehicle tax, and they're being really non-committal about what they're going to do, and that change, because it is one of the best taxes for government now, where people don't realise they're kind of paying it, and so they really don't want to do anything about it, but they're going to have to, and there's opportunity there for government to be really progressive about what they do about that, but we aren't really seeing any appetite from government to explain what they're doing.
Okay, David?
Just very quickly, I would. It's great to hear that, because one of the points I've written down was a focus on decarbonised pathway for freight, for transport and rail combined. That's really good news. And just take the stakeholders with you on that journey, the customers. And if anybody who's been in working for longer than 40 years, when they saw the careers officer 40 years ago at school, they wouldn't believe the job they're doing now. It wasn't even invented then. So let's get some of the younger people that, through schools and colleges aware and get them involved in this. Because my daughter's at Edinburgh, and she's at the very same point. They get a free bus pass, so she's on the bus every day. We go to somewhere else, they can't use it. So you get those people involved in the decision making as well.
Excellent. And sadly, that's all we've got time for. I feel like we could stay here all afternoon, but it's been a fantastic discussion. I think the key messages coming out are around devolution down to the north and to regions within the north. It's about everyone getting out of their silos and actually working with each other and talking to each other. And then that big, massive project about taking residents on that journey towards net zero. So round of applause for our fantastic panel.